It's tough when we see those images after a hurricane, just utter devastation. And it's hard not to think about the people, who have lost everything. And that's kind of where we're going today, right? We're diving into the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and specifically what's happening in North Carolina. You've been following this story really closely, so, firsthand how dire the situation is.
Yeah, absolutely. Hurricane Helene was devastating. I mean, it tore through 6 states in total, and we're talking over 225 lives lost, most of those in North Carolina. And Rutherford County seems to have been hit especially hard.
Just heartbreaking.
Right.
And, it's in these moments when a community is at its most vulnerable that you'd expect everyone to come together, right? To focus on rebuilding and, supporting those in need. But instead, we're seeing a disturbing trend in North Carolina, threats against the very people who are there to help FEMA workers.
It's really unbelievable to think that after a disaster like this, that these folks wouldn't be met with open arms. But the thing is, there's so much fear and misinformation circulating that it makes it really tough for these people to do their jobs effectively.
Yeah, this isn't, just kind of grumbling. We're talking about serious incidents that are preventing recovery efforts from moving forward.
That's right. I mean, FEMA crews have actually had to relocate from their base of operations because of safety concerns, and they've even had to completely halt door-to-door visits in some areas, and that's typically how they reach people who are the most vulnerable, those who are isolated and might not otherwise be able to access help.
And then there was that incident in Rutherford County, which the initial reports were terrifying about this armed group confronting FEMA workers. I mean, that's chilling.
It really is, and it speaks to the level of distrust and fear that's out there. Fortunately, it seems like it wasn't actually a group, but a lone actor. A 44-year-old man, William Parsons, was arrested and charged with going armed to the terror of the public.
Okay, so that's a relief at least. But, even though it was one person, it still has this ripple effect, doesn't it? This idea that FEMA's presence is somehow, threatening or that they can't be trusted.
Absolutely. And you couple that with the rampant misinformation that's circulating online, and it's created this perfect storm of uncertainty and fear.
So let's get into this misinformation a little bit.
Yeah.
What are people actually saying? Because it can't just be like a general distrust in the government, right?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, it's way more specific than that. One of the most common rumors that's circulating is that the government's actually intentionally holding back aid around Chuney Rock. Have you heard about this?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. So the theory is that they're going to seize the land for some kind of development project, and they're using the hurricane as an excuse.
Oh, come on. That's just so cynical. Like trying to take advantage of people when they're at their lowest point. Using a tragedy like this for land grabs? I mean, who would believe that?
It's crazy, right? But that's the thing about misinformation. It really preys on people's fears and anxieties, especially in times of crisis. And the sad thing is that a lot of residents are buying into it. And then there's another rumor spreading about the amount of aid that people are receiving.
Yeah, I think I saw something about that. Like a really low amount.
Yeah, it's saying that victims are only getting like $750 in aid.
Seriously, $750.
Which, I get it. People would understandably be upset by that figure, but the problem is that's just the initial assistance. It's just to cover those immediate needs. Additional support is available, depending on people's individual situations and how much they've lost.
So they're just kind of grabbing these snippets of information and running with it without getting the full story.
That's exactly what's happening, and it's making it really hard for FEMA to do their job. I mean, they're literally having to dedicate time and resources to debunking these rumors. They've even set up a whole web page to address this misinformation.
Wow. So instead of, getting supplies to people who need it, they're having to combat, this digital hurricane of misinformation.
Exactly. And the thing about these rumors is that they have real world consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, think about it. Someone who's just lost everything. They're desperate for help, but they're seeing these things online, and they might not even reach out to FEMA.
Right. They're thinking, why bother?
Exactly. They might think, the government's just going to take my land anyway. Or $750, that's not going to even make a dent in my expenses, so why bother?
So they're being victimized twice over. First by the actual hurricane, and then by, this wave of bad information.
Exactly. And it's not just theoretical either. Secretary Mayorkas was on Face the Nation recently, and he was talking about how this misinformation is directly stopping people from getting the help they need. They're eligible, but they're not even applying because they believe these rumors.
It's just heartbreaking. And honestly, it's infuriating. But is there something else going on here? I mean, is there something beyond just, misinformation spreading online that's feeding into this?
Yeah, you've hit on something really important here. This whole situation has unfortunately become really politicized, which just makes the spread of misinformation even worse.
Here we go. Politics. It always seems to rear its ugly head even in the midst of a crisis. So what are they saying?
Well, there are those, including Trump and his allies, who have been pretty vocal about criticizing FEMA's response under the Biden administration.
Okay, yeah.
They're making claims about aid being diverted away from hurricane victims, to fund other initiatives.
Like what other initiatives are we even talking about in the middle of this, disaster of this scale?
Well, one of the claims going around is that FEMA is diverting aid to support the influx of immigrants at the border.
Wait, are you serious? They're saying that aid meant for hurricane victims is going to immigrants. It's just wrong on so many levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely unfounded claim. The funding for disaster relief and immigration are totally separate, but it's the kind of accusation that just sows more division and distrust at a time when we really need to be pulling together.
It's just wrong to exploit people suffering and pain for some kind of political point.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. This thing has even gone down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. We've seen accusations about the government somehow controlling the weather, and figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene are promoting this idea.
Weather control? Come on now.
That's a new one.
I know, right? It's a perfect example of how misinformation can completely spiral out of control, especially when it plays into people's existing beliefs.
Even President Biden addressed it and called these theories, stupid.
He did. Which, on the one hand is almost laughable, but the thing is, this kind of rhetoric really does have an impact on people. It affects their trust in institutions, their willingness to get help, and ultimately their ability to recover from something like this.
Absolutely.
This whole situation in North Carolina, it really highlights how fragile things are, especially in our current climate where there's so much distrust and misinformation flying around.
This feels like a much bigger issue than just one hurricane. It's almost like we're seeing this erosion of trust in so many areas of life. You're absolutely right. This situation in North Carolina exposes a vulnerability that extends far beyond disaster relief. We live in an age where information spreads at lightning speed, and it's often difficult to discern fact from fiction.
Especially for those directly impacted. They're already dealing with unimaginable loss and stress, and the last thing they need is to be wading through a sea of rumors on top of everything else.
Exactly. It's like adding insult to injury. And unfortunately, the people spreading these falsehoods often prey on that vulnerability, exploiting people's fears for their own agendas.
It's easy to say, just don't believe everything you read online, but it's not always that simple. So where do we go from here? How do we arm ourselves and our communities against this onslaught of misinformation?
That's the million-dollar question. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but becoming more discerning consumers of information is a good place to start. We need to be willing to question what we see and hear, especially when it seems sensational or too good to be true.
So a healthy dose of skepticism is key. But how do you actually do that in a practical way, especially when we're talking about life or death situations like a natural disaster?
Right. When it comes to disaster relief, verifying information with official sources like FEMA or local authorities is crucial. Don't just share something because it popped up on your social media feed. Take a moment to check its validity. Look for evidence cross-reference with reputable news outlets, and be wary of information that evokes strong emotional responses without any supporting facts.
It's almost like we need to become information detectives in a way.
Precisely. And part of that detective work involves being aware of our own biases. We tend to gravitate towards information that confirms our existing beliefs, but it's vital to challenge those biases and actively seek out diverse perspectives.
And maybe just as importantly, talking to each other. Having open and honest conversations with friends, family, and our communities about the dangers of misinformation and the importance of seeking out accurate information.
You've hit on a crucial point. We need to foster a culture of critical thinking and media literacy, both for ourselves and for future generations.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's easy to dismiss these incidents as isolated events or just the unfortunate side effect of the internet age. But this goes much deeper than that. It's about the erosion of trust, the manipulation of fear, and the very real consequences for people who are simply trying to rebuild their lives.
It's a stark reminder that we all have a role to play in combating misinformation. It's not just about being skeptical, it's about being responsible, discerning, and engaged citizens.
So as you continue to follow the recovery efforts in North Carolina and beyond, remember this information is powerful. It can be a force for good or a weapon of destruction. It's up to each of us to decide how we'll wield it.